He was a billionaire, someone who had everything money could buy: luxury cars, private jets, a mansion that could rival a palace, and a life most people could only dream of. Yet despite all of his wealth, he often felt a deep sense of doubt about the people around him, especially those who worked in his household. He had always trusted his staff, believing they were loyal, but lately, subtle hints and strange little incidents had made him question whether everyone in his house truly had his best interests at heart. It wasn't that he had experienced betrayal before, but he had learned that wealth attracts all kinds of people, and not all of them were honest. He decided that he needed to know the truth, to uncover the secrets that might be hidden behind polite smiles and friendly greetings. Late one evening, after finishing a long day of meetings and business calls, he sat in his private study staring at the city lights through the huge glass windows. His mind raced with possibilities, and a plan began to take shape. He would fake a trip abroad, a luxurious business journey that everyone would believe was real. It had to be convincing, flawless, and well-timed, so no one could suspect that it was a ruse. The idea wasn't born out of cruelty or paranoia, but out of a desire for clarity. He wanted to see who would act differently in his absence, who would reveal their true colors when they thought no one was watching. He began by meticulously arranging every detail of his trip, from booking expensive flights to a faraway city to leaving behind packing lists and suitcases as though he had really traveled. He even sent out official-looking emails to colleagues and business partners, confirming meetings he had supposedly scheduled, so that the illusion would be complete. Every small detail mattered. From the newspapers left on the table to the notes on his office desk, he wanted everything to look authentic. Because if it was even slightly suspicious, his plan could fail. While preparing, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It was like setting up a grand experiment where he was both the observer and the subject. He walked through his mansion, imagining how each member of his staff would react. Would the maid continue her normal routines, or would she behave differently? Would the other staff members notice small changes and perhaps gossip behind his back? He wanted to find out, but he also knew that what he might see could shock him beyond expectation. He also considered the role of his twin, who lived in the same mansion but had always been more private and secretive. The twin had always been polite and friendly, but he knew that people often hide their true selves even from family, and he wanted to understand whether the twin had any hidden ambitions, desires, or secrets. The thought of seeing unexpected behavior, perhaps even betrayal, sent a shiver down his spine. But he reminded himself that knowledge was power, and this plan was necessary to protect his life, his wealth, and even his peace of mind. The billionaire then made arrangements to ensure he would be truly absent, without anyone suspecting anything. He would leave a schedule with his assistant, who would act as if he were unavailable for weeks. He instructed his security team to maintain normal routines in his absence, so no one would get suspicious. Every camera, every service, every little habit in the house was planned to remain exactly the same. Except for his physical presence, which would be completely gone. He wanted to observe everything, yet without leaving any trace of his awareness. As the departure day approached, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. It was a dangerous game he was about to play, a game that could either expose hidden truths or cause unforeseen complications. He knew he had to stay calm, focused, and clever, because once he left, he would be entirely dependent on what he could secretly observe. He packed lightly, but made sure that anyone who saw him leaving would think he was going on a luxurious, long-haul trip. The suitcases, tickets, and itinerary had to scream authenticity, and he had made sure nothing about the setup would give him away. Finally, the day came, and as he stepped into the sleek black car that would take him to the airport, he looked back at his mansion, the place that held not only his wealth but also all the hidden truths he was about to discover. The plan was simple in theory but complex in execution, and he knew that the real surprises would not come from his trip but from the people he left behind. He smiled faintly, a mixture of excitement and apprehension running through him, because little did he know that what he would uncover in the coming days would shock him more than he could ever imagine, and the seemingly ordinary world of his mansion was about to be turned upside down. As the billionaire's car disappeared into the night, the mansion seemed quieter than usual, almost as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Inside, the staff continued their routines, but there was an invisible shift in the air, something unspoken that only those who knew the house well could sense. The butler polished the silverware with slightly more care than usual, the cook hummed a tune that sounded a little forced, and the maid moved around with a careful watchfulness in her eyes. Nobody suspected that the master of the house was not really gone, or that he was watching everything without anyone knowing. For the billionaire, the thrill of leaving unnoticed was unlike anything he had felt before. He had orchestrated this departure with the precision of a master strategist, leaving behind just enough evidence to convince the world that he was thousands of miles away, but in reality, every moment that passed inside the mansion would be observed, analyzed, and remembered. He imagined himself as a hidden presence, like a ghost, silently witnessing the actions, reactions, and secrets of those he had trusted for years. The mansion itself seemed to breathe differently without him, its enormous hallways echoing with quiet footsteps that were normally hushed by the weight of his authority. Even the chandeliers, with their sparkling crystals, seemed to glimmer with a subtle tension, reflecting the unspoken dynamics of the people inside. The twin moved through the rooms with a calm exterior, yet the billionaire suspected that appearances were deceiving. There was always more beneath the surface, more hidden motives and desires than anyone dared to admit. As hours turned into a day, the staff began to act more freely, each person responding in small ways to the absence of the billionaire. The maid, in particular, seemed unusually relaxed, her movements fluid and confident as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She whispered quietly to herself, checking on rooms and making small adjustments, unaware that cameras and hidden observers had captured every detail. The billionaire felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness, knowing that the real story was about to unfold. Meanwhile, the twin appeared to carry on as usual, yet there was a subtle tension in his expressions that suggested thoughts he would never openly share. He laughed politely at jokes that might not have been funny and nodded along in conversations that seemed trivial, but the billionaire knew that these small actions often hid big truths. The absence of authority, the disappearance of someone in power, often revealed the real character of those who remained, and he was eager to uncover it. By the second day, the mansion had taken on a different rhythm, almost like a living entity responding to its master's absence. The staff whispered softly in corners, exchanging glances that might have been innocent but carried unspoken meanings. The cook lingered longer in the kitchen, tasting food and adjusting flavors as if testing boundaries, while the maid moved from room to room with an efficiency that seemed almost rehearsed. The billionaire watched it all, noting every glance, every hesitation, and every smile that didn't reach the eyes. What made this experiment even more fascinating was the unpredictable nature of human behavior. He realized that even in a well-ordered household, people could act in ways that surprised him, and the smallest moments often revealed the deepest secrets. He thought of how easy it would be for someone to cross a line if they believed no one was watching, and he wondered what hidden desires or plans might finally surface. As night fell over the mansion on the third day, the quiet corridors and grand rooms held an eerie sense of anticipation. Something was about to happen. He could feel it, even from afar. The staff seemed more relaxed but also more alert, as if sensing that unseen eyes were present. The maid paused in the hallway, glancing at the twin with an expression that was both calculating and playful, while the twin responded with a subtle smirk that suggested complicity in some secret, unknown to anyone else. The billionaire leaned back in his temporary hotel room thousands of miles away, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and apprehension. His plan was working perfectly, yet he knew that what he would see next might be more shocking than anything he had imagined. The mansion, which had always been a place of comfort and control, was now a stage for drama and revelation, and every moment that passed brought him closer to the truth, closer to the shocking discovery that would forever change his understanding of loyalty, trust, and human nature. With the billionaire miles away, the mansion began to reveal secrets that had long been hidden in plain sight. Among all the staff, it was the maid who carried the most unusual energy. Her movements were precise, almost rehearsed, and her eyes flickered with thoughts she didn't dare speak aloud. She had always been attentive, loyal in appearance, yet beneath that polite exterior, there was a calculating mind. A mind that had watched the household for months, memorizing routines, noting weaknesses, and quietly waiting for the right moment to act. No one had suspected her intentions, and that was exactly how she wanted it. She moved through the corridors with the practiced ease of someone who knew every secret passage and every unnoticed corner, cleaning, arranging, and tidying up, yet each task was done with a purpose beyond appearance. Her glances often lingered on the twin, subtle and quick, but meaningful enough to hint at a connection that could not be explained by simple curiosity. It was a connection built on secrecy, one that had been quietly developing without anyone noticing. She began to manipulate small situations to her advantage, adjusting furniture here, leaving items there, testing boundaries without anyone realizing. Every gesture was calculated to observe reactions, every movement was designed to see who would question, who would intervene, and who would simply follow along. The billionaire, had he been present, might have noticed these subtle signs, but with him gone, the house had become her stage, and she was the unseen director orchestrating the unfolding drama. The twins' behavior added another layer to the mystery. He seemed unusually calm, almost too calm, but the maid's subtle cues and glances suggested an unspoken alliance. Theirs was a relationship built on secrets, shared only in hushed whispers and fleeting moments. They communicated without words, a silent understanding that others could not detect, and it was this invisible thread that made the mansion pulse with tension. Something was happening that no one outside those walls could ever imagine. As the day passed, the maid's actions became bolder, yet she remained careful, always maintaining the appearance of normalcy. If anyone had watched her closely, they would have seen the difference between the housemaid everyone trusted and the woman who was quietly plotting. She rearranged certain areas, checked and rechecked rooms, always with a hidden motive. Each smile she offered to the staff was carefully measured, designed to deflect suspicion, while every interaction with the twin carried subtle hints that something extraordinary was unfolding. She also started leaving small, accidental clues, subtle enough to be overlooked by most, but meaningful enough for someone observing closely to notice. These were tests, challenges, ways to see who was truly paying attention, who would notice the small discrepancies, and who would remain oblivious. It was a dangerous game, one that required intelligence, patience, and careful timing, and the maid had all of these qualities, allowing her to move confidently through the mansion as if she owned it, even though she remained officially just another member of the staff. By the evening, the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted completely. The grand rooms, normally orderly and predictable, now felt unpredictable, charged with an unspoken tension. The staff whispered occasionally, unaware that they were being observed, yet the maid's focus was entirely on the twin, and the connection between them grew stronger with every passing hour. They shared small glances, fleeting touches, and private smiles that spoke volumes in silence. No one could see it, no one could understand it, but the billionaire's absence had created the perfect environment for the hidden agenda to emerge. As night fell, the mansion seemed alive with anticipation, and the maid moved with a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose that was both mesmerizing and alarming. She knew that soon, everything she had carefully orchestrated would come to a head, and that the billionaire's return, whenever it happened, would reveal truths that could no longer be hidden. Secrets that had been buried under polite manners and routine would finally see the light, and the world as the household knew it would never be the same again. While the maid moved carefully through the mansion, plotting her hidden agenda, the twin quietly played his own game. Though he had always appeared calm, polite, and completely ordinary, there was a side of him that almost no one had ever seen, a side that thrived in secrecy, a side that waited for the perfect moment to step out of the shadows. The billionaire had always assumed his twin was predictable, trustworthy, and safe, but the truth was far more complicated, and far more dangerous. The twins' life within the mansion was like a carefully written story, each chapter hidden behind the mask of normality. In the presence of staff, he laughed at jokes, nodded politely in conversations, and followed routines without question. But in private, when the billionaire was away, he revealed behaviors that were completely different. He had interests, desires, and plans that he kept locked away, carefully concealed from the watchful eyes of everyone around him. He had noticed the maid's subtle movements long before anyone else, and there had always been a silent connection between them, one built on small observations, fleeting interactions, and unspoken understanding. While the staff believed they were just two ordinary people in the same household, in reality, they shared a secret world, a private language of glances and gestures that only they could understand. Every shared smile, every quiet nod, carried meaning, building a tension that was invisible to outsiders but growing stronger with each passing day. The twins' secret life was not just about the maid, though she played a significant role. It was also about freedom, about testing boundaries, and about exploring the parts of himself that could never be revealed under the watchful eye of the billionaire. In private corners of the mansion, he would experiment with small acts of rebellion, tiny ways to assert independence while still maintaining appearances. Every hidden action was deliberate, calculated to avoid detection but also to feel a thrill of control, a feeling he had never experienced when the billionaire was present. He had learned to observe people with the precision of a detective, noting reactions, measuring trust, and understanding motivations. It was a skill developed over years, one that allowed him to anticipate the staff's behavior, predict small mistakes, and exploit tiny weaknesses. The twins' secret life was a careful balance between caution and risk, between maintaining normal appearances and exploring hidden truths. And the absence of the billionaire gave him an opportunity to act more boldly, to test limits that had always been untouchable. The relationship between the twin and the maid became more apparent during these days. Though still invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for, they moved through the mansion in a silent rhythm, a choreography perfected over weeks, each aware of the other's intentions without needing words. Every shared glance, every subtle movement, deepened their secret bond, creating a tension that was both thrilling and dangerous. It was a hidden alliance, a partnership built on secrecy, observation, and mutual understanding. As the days went by, the twin began leaving small hints of his hidden life, not enough to be discovered by anyone else, but enough to test how far he could go without being caught. It was a game, a test of control and subtle power, and it made him feel alive in a way that his usual polite existence never had. Every hallway, every room, every corner of the mansion became part of a private world he shared only with the maid, and it was a world that had nothing to do with the billionaire's expectations or rules. By the third night of the billionaire's absence, the mansion felt charged with a quiet, dangerous energy. The twin moved with confidence and secrecy, aware of his power in this new temporary reality. He could see how the staff reacted subtly to the changes, how the maid adjusted her behavior, and how small actions had larger consequences than anyone realized. He was no longer just the twin living in the shadow of wealth and authority. He was a silent force shaping events, and the story that was unfolding would soon reveal truths no one expected. The billionaire had expected subtle changes in his absence, small hints of human nature revealing themselves, but what he discovered went far beyond anything he could have imagined. From his hidden cameras and carefully placed observers, he began to see a reality that shocked him to his core. The mansion, which had always seemed orderly and controlled, had transformed into a stage for secrets, betrayals, and hidden desires. Each moment captured by his devices revealed layers of deception he had never suspected. It started with the maid, whose polite exterior had always masked a cunning mind. The footage showed her moving confidently through the mansion, but not just cleaning or organizing. She interacted with the twin in ways that were far too intimate for casual familiarity, sharing glances, subtle touches, and private smiles that spoke of unspoken agreements and secret plans. The billionaire watched, frozen, as he realized that the bond between them was far deeper than mere friendship or companionship. It was a connection built on trust, secrecy, and hidden intentions, and it was unfolding right under his nose. But the surprises didn't end there. The twin, who had always appeared calm and reserved, now revealed a side of himself that was shocking in its audacity. In private corners of the mansion, he engaged in actions that no one had ever imagined, manipulating situations, testing boundaries, and subtly challenging the authority of the household. He was not just reacting to the absence of the billionaire. He was actively shaping events, orchestrating moments that would have consequences far beyond his immediate understanding. The billionaire leaned closer to the monitor as the scenes unfolded, feeling a mix of anger, disbelief, and fascination. Every small gesture, every whispered word, seemed deliberate, calculated to achieve a hidden goal. He realized that what he had assumed was loyalty and innocence in his twin and the maid was, in fact, carefully controlled deception. The maid's actions were no longer just clever, they were bold, audacious, and entirely unexpected, revealing ambitions and desires that had been buried beneath layers of politeness and routine. What made the discovery even more shocking was the subtlety of it all. The pair had not rushed into obvious betrayal or reckless acts. Instead, they had moved like shadows, almost invisible, testing limits and boundaries without raising suspicion. The mansion had become a theater of hidden drama, and the billionaire, despite being thousands of miles away, was both audience and judge, witnessing a story that he had never imagined would unfold in his own home. He paused the footage at one point, staring at the twin and the maid, realizing that the trust he had taken for granted had been carefully exploited. The dynamics between them were complex, layered with manipulation, loyalty, secrecy, and a strange kind of partnership that challenged everything he believed about the people closest to him. Each revelation was more shocking than the last, painting a picture of human behavior that was cunning, unpredictable, and dangerously clever. Yet amid the shock, the billionaire also felt a strange admiration. Even in deceit, there was intelligence, patience, and strategy. The maid had orchestrated her moves with precision, and the twin had executed his hidden agenda flawlessly. They were clever, daring, and fearless in their secrecy, qualities he had never seen expressed in such subtle, controlled ways. It was both thrilling and terrifying to witness, and it forced him to reconsider not just his household, but the assumptions he had made about trust, loyalty, and human nature. As night fell over the mansion, the billionaire sat silently, replaying footage, analyzing every frame. Every discovery raised new questions, and every revelation deepened the mystery. What had started as a simple test of loyalty had become a shocking exposé of hidden lives, ambitions, and desires. The mansion, once familiar and safe, now felt like a puzzle filled with secrets. And the billionaire knew that the next steps would be critical, for the truth was no longer hidden, and the consequences of these unexpected discoveries were about to unfold in ways he could never have imagined. The billionaire finally returned, stepping through the grand doors of his mansion with a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Every detail of his trip had been meticulously planned, but nothing could prepare him for the storm he was about to face. The air inside the mansion seemed heavier, charged with an energy that hinted at secrets finally exposed. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound, made him aware that the house was no longer just a home, it was a stage set for revelations. He moved quietly through the halls, observing the staff, noting subtle reactions that only confirmed what he had already seen in the footage. The maid's eyes widened slightly, the twin's expression flickered, and in that instant, the billionaire knew the time for subtle observation was over. It was time for confrontation, for truth, no matter how shocking it might be. He first called the maid into the study, the room where he often held important discussions. His presence was calm but commanding, a force that immediately filled the space. She entered, pretending composure, but the slightest tremor in her hands betrayed her nerves. He didn't speak immediately, simply watching her, letting the tension build as she realized that her carefully orchestrated secrets were about to be unveiled. "What have you been hiding?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The question seemed simple, but it carried the weight of every secret, every hidden glance, every unspoken action captured during his absence. The maid hesitated, a flicker of panic crossing her face, yet there was also a strange defiance, a recognition that she had been clever, that her actions had been calculated to achieve something significant. I didn't mean any harm," she began, but the words sounded hollow, even to her. Next, the twin was called, and the dynamic shifted immediately. The twins' calm exterior faltered for the first time, revealing a mixture of guilt, defiance, and pride. They both stood there, aware that their alliance, their secret world, was fully exposed. The billionaire looked between them, analyzing every subtle cue, every micro-expression, understanding that what he saw in those moments was the culmination of weeks of deception, strategy, and hidden ambition. "You both knew I was watching," he continued, his tone sharpened with realization, "and yet you still chose to act as you did." The words hung in the room like a physical weight, pressing against walls and ceilings, demanding acknowledgement. The maid and the twin exchanged a glance, and for the first time, the unspoken bond between them was clear to the billionaire. It wasn't just friendship, curiosity, or mischief. It was a partnership built on secrecy, manipulation, and shared understanding. The maid spoke next, her voice steadier now. "We didn't think you would ever notice. We just wanted to explore," she admitted, choosing her words carefully. The twin added, "It was never about hurting anyone. We just wanted freedom," even if for a short time. Their explanations were incomplete, inadequate, but they revealed enough to explain the motives, the hidden desires that had fueled their actions. The billionaire listened quietly, feeling a mixture of anger, betrayal, and reluctant admiration. He realized that his household, his life of luxury and control, had been a stage for clever minds operating in shadows. He saw not just deception, but intelligence, courage, and audacity, qualities he had underestimated. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet he could not ignore the complexity of human behavior that had been revealed. After a long pause, he finally spoke again. "What you did was reckless, but it also taught me something I could not have learned any other way." His tone softened slightly, acknowledging the truth that even in betrayal, there were lessons to be learned. The maid and the twin, still nervous, sensed that their punishment would not be cruel, but that the consequences of their choices were clear and serious. That night, the mansion settled into an uneasy calm. The confrontation had revealed truths that could not be undone, but it had also created an opportunity for understanding, boundaries, and reflection. The billionaire knew that trust would have to be rebuilt, rules clarified, and relationships reassessed, but he also understood that the discovery of truth, though shocking, had given him insight into human nature, loyalty, and ambition that he could never have gained otherwise. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe, realizing that the confrontation had not just exposed deception, it had also illuminated the resilience, intelligence, and complexity of those around him, and that knowledge, however difficult, was now his to carry forward. The billionaire sat quietly in the mansion's sunlit drawing room, the events of the past days weighing heavily on his mind. For years, he had believed that money could solve every problem, that wealth was the ultimate shield against life's cruelties. Yet now, watching his son smile, hear, and respond after days of despair, he realized how profoundly mistaken he had been. The true value of life was not measured in riches, cars, or estates. It was measured in care, attention, and the selfless actions of those who truly understood the human heart. His eyes found the maid, standing quietly near the doorway, her expression calm but gentle. She had been there through every sleepless night, every tense hour, guiding the child, observing the smallest signs of hope, and acting on instincts that the doctors themselves had overlooked. The billionaire's chest tightened as he thought of all the times he had underestimated her, assuming that her role in the household was simple and limited. Now, he realized that her knowledge, intuition, and dedication had literally saved his son's life. He rose slowly, walking toward her with a mix of humility and awe. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "You didn't just help my son, you saved him, and in doing so, you saved us all." The maid lowered her eyes modestly, shaking her head. "I just did what I felt was right, sir. I didn't do it for thanks," she said softly, yet her words carried the weight of courage and conviction. The billionaire could see now that gratitude alone could never capture the depth of what she had done, but he would spend the rest of his life showing it. As he reflected, he thought about the doctors who had given up, the prognosis they had delivered with clinical detachment, and the fear that had gripped his family. He realized that expertise and knowledge, while valuable, were not enough in the face of human fragility. Compassion, observation, and dedication, the qualities the maid had shown, were equally, if not more, powerful. They had created a miracle in a situation that had seemed hopeless, and the billionaire understood that true wisdom often comes from the most unexpected places. He walked back to his son, now resting comfortably in the bright nursery, and watched him breathe, a steady rhythm replacing the panic of before. A small smile appeared on the child's face as he reached out his tiny hand, and the billionaire felt a wave of emotion he had never experienced before. Pride, relief, and an overwhelming sense of humility washed over him. He realized that wealth had given him comfort, but it was empathy, attentiveness, and courage that had given him life. In the days that followed, the billionaire began to change, not in appearance or possessions, but in outlook. He treated the maid with newfound respect, listening to her insights, valuing her advice, and acknowledging her role as an essential member of the family. No longer just a staff member, she had become a guardian, a teacher, and a reminder of what it truly meant to care for someone. The mansion, once a place of structure and hierarchy, now felt alive with warmth, understanding, and gratitude. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the estate, the billionaire sat alone in his study, thinking about the lessons he had learned. Wealth, he realized, could not purchase miracles. Love, patience, observation, and dedication, qualities often overlooked, could. He smiled faintly, knowing that the gratitude he felt was not simply a feeling, but a lesson etched into his heart forever. He vowed to carry it forward, to live differently, and to honor those who had touched his life in ways money never could. And as he looked toward the nursery, hearing the soft giggles of his son and the quiet presence of the maid nearby, he knew that life, even in its darkest moments, could be changed by courage, care, and humanity. The billionaire understood that the most profound miracles were not bought, they were given, nurtured, and shared, and the gratitude he felt would guide every choice he made from that moment on. The mansion, once filled with tension, fear, and uncertainty, now hummed with a quiet, gentle energy. Life had returned, but it was different this time, deeper, more meaningful. The billionaire watched his son play in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, the child's laughter bright and unrestrained, bouncing off the walls that had so recently echoed with despair. Every smile, every small movement, was a reminder of how fragile yet precious life truly was, and how quickly it could change. The maid, who had been at the center of this incredible transformation, moved gracefully through the rooms, her eyes soft with care and warmth. She no longer seemed just a staff member carrying out duties, she had become a part of the family's heartbeat, a silent force of wisdom, compassion, and dedication that had quietly turned tragedy into hope. The billionaire often caught himself watching her with awe, realizing that her courage and insight had reshaped not only his son's life, but his own. Understanding of trust, loyalty, and human value. The days that followed were filled with small but profound changes. The billionaire became more attentive, more present, learning to appreciate the moments that truly mattered. He spent time with his son not just as a father, but as a mentor, a guide, and a witness to the child's recovery and growth. Each interaction was now treasured, each laugh, hug, or glance carrying a weight far greater than any material possession could ever hold. The household staff, too, felt the shift. Inspired by the maid's dedication, they moved with more care, more empathy, more understanding of the lives around them. The mansion, which had once been a place of hierarchy and routine, was now alive with collaboration, shared responsibility, and mutual respect. The billionaire encouraged this change, using his wealth not to command, but to support and uplift, creating an environment where trust and care flourished alongside luxury. He also took time to reflect on the lessons the ordeal had taught him. No amount of money could replace human connection, no lavish lifestyle could compensate for attentiveness and empathy. True strength lay in understanding, compassion, and the willingness to act for the sake of others without expectation. The billionaire realized that miracles were not the work of doctors alone, nor the result of wealth. They were born from courage, observation, patience, and love, qualities the maid had shown in abundance. Over time, the child's health continued to improve steadily, surpassing even the most hopeful predictions. Each day brought new milestones, new laughter, and a growing sense of joy that had once seemed impossible. The billionaire and his family celebrated every small victory, aware that life's fragility made each moment more precious. The maid's influence was celebrated quietly, her role in this transformation recognized not just in words, but in trust, respect, and deep gratitude. As the sun rose on a new morning, painting the mansion's grand halls with golden light, the billionaire stood near the nursery, watching his son explore the world with curiosity and energy. He smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace, knowing that life, even when threatened by despair, could be rebuilt, reshaped, and renewed. The experience had transformed not only his understanding of care and trust but his approach to life itself, making him more aware, more humble, and more compassionate. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth alone, had become a home filled with connection, warmth, and purpose, and at its heart stood the maid, a quiet hero whose courage, insight, and dedication had changed the course of lives. The billionaire understood that the greatest treasures in life were not measured in gold, jewels, or estates, but in the love, loyalty, and care we give to one another. And so, with his son thriving, his family stronger, and his understanding of the world forever transformed, the billionaire embraced this new beginning, a life where miracles were possible, hope was tangible, and the bonds of trust and gratitude formed the foundation of a future brighter than anything money could buy. Every day from that moment on was a gift, and every gift was cherished, because now, more than ever, he knew what truly mattered.